Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my PhD defense, but also, of course, welcome in Enschede. I am really honored that so many of you traveled to Enschede. I know it's far from everything, so welcome. This is me, 4 years ago, really happy and really enthusiastic about life. And before I officially start, there are two people I have to introduce to you. If I don't do it, they're not allowed to sit, and we don't want that. So behind me we have my two paranyms, Dr. Nina Trouwernicht, Assistant Professor in Humanitarian Engineering. And on my right we have Dr. Bas, Asset Manager at ASML. Both of these were my colleagues in the Zira project. And I really hope that by the end of today I also look as happy as they do, holding their diploma. So you may sit. So I already said it, the Zira project, which stands for System Integration for Railway Advancement. We carry out the project together with NS, ProRail, Ministerie van Infrastructuur en Waterstaat, and also involvement of knowledge platforms like Railforum. For those of you who don't know Dutch railway system, ProRail is the infrastructure manager, so they are managing the tracks, and S is the main railway operator, so they are basically driving the trains in the large parts of the Netherlands. I was thinking of a whole story to tell you a bit about the project and about integration, but then I thought who better to tell you the story than the people we have collaborated with closely. So enjoy.
Ik was technisch directeur van de Nederlandse Spoorwegen.
In het Zira-project is dat ik eigenlijk casuïstiek aanbreng voor de PhD's.
Nieuwe technologie leidt tot enorme verwevenheid van assets, van bedrijfsprocessen, aanbestedingsstrategieën. We zullen dat integraal moeten blijven bekijken, daar zullen we tools voor moeten ontwikkelen, daar zullen we mensen voor moeten opleiden. De menskant is echt het bepalende aspect wat mij betreft.
Systeemintegratie is belangrijk en het Zira-onderzoek heeft daarin opgeleverd dat het van belang is dat je niet alleen op inhoud goed met elkaar samenwerkt, maar dat je ook op het proces en in de organisatie goed met elkaar samenwerkt.
Het is leuk om de academische wereld en de praktijk bij elkaar te brengen.
En dat betekent dat er problemen vanuit uiteindelijk de industrie, vragen vanuit de industrie, met dat toegepaste onderzoek kunnen worden doorontwikkeld naar oplossingen. En dat we ook aansluiten op de fundamentele wetenschap waar kennis wordt ontwikkeld.
I like the way how you younger people work on these complex topics, bringing new energy, how we reflecting, helping us, but also we can help you to give the, let's say, practical feedback on the world. And I think the combination of experience and experience in the field of our businesses, bringing back to the scientific part of the new developments is so interesting, and I really like it. I like to be working with you guys because you are positive, you're working hard, and I'm always amazing at the results at the end of your work after 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is.
En ik denk op deze manier dat we zelfs ook NS en Pro weer een beetje bij elkaar hebben gebracht. Dus keep up the good work.
So that's a bit about the project in general. Sorry. And then zooming in, more practical example, this is Bas. Bas is a train driver who makes sure I can travel from Rotterdam to Enschede by train. And in order for him to do his job, there are so many technical parts, so many rules and regulations, so many systems all working together to make sure he can actually do his work. Now what happens if we want to change something? Let's say we want to have a small robot helping with the maintenance facilities. For that, we need to know how does this fit into the existing railway system? Does it have an effect on the existing railway system or the other way around? And do we need modifications in regulations, in technical parts to make sure this integration is going smoothly? So just to wrap that part up, we have existing railway system. There are a lot of performance improvements. We want cheaper trains, faster trains, lighter trains, I'm just mentioning. And in order to achieve those improvements, changes of different kinds, innovations, different projects, are integrated within the railway system. And in order to make sure that integration is going well, we need to pay attention also to not only the technical parts, but also the human elements, the rules and regulations, and the processes behind it. But if we look around us, there are so many examples that integration does not always go smoothly. in the Netherlands, in Europe, also in the whole world. A recent example is in Spain, where they bought a lot of trains, and in the end they noticed that the trains didn't fit tunnels. So that's not something you would like to have. It costs a lot of money, and it's really not desirable. But there are a lot of reasons why these integration challenges or failures actually happen. The first one is the inter-organizational nature of the railway system. Multiple organizations are working together, for example, as ProRail, to make sure that everything is working like we expect it to do. It's also socio-technical, which means, like I said, it's not only the technical part, but also the human elements, the rules and regulations, and all the processes behind it. There are numerous interfaces within the organizations, but also between organizations. So if we want to implement the change, we need to know how it will fit, how it will impact the existing system, or the other way around. And that is what I call scope definition. And what we also see happening with the arrival of modern technologies is that the scope is getting larger and larger. So more organizations are involved, more interfaces, more people, more processes, which makes this a whole lot more difficult. In addition, there is a lack of integral view. Everyone involved actually has a different view of the implications of a change, and so of the integration scope. So we need to do it together to know that we are actually integrating an elephant. So that was a bit the problem context. We try to identify, okay, this image is systems thinking, understanding how everything is working together. If there's a change, how it will affect the system or the other way around, and how can systems thinking actually support integration in the Dutch railways. As a result of this, several tools were developed, tested, and implemented. The first one is the mosaic analysis. It's mainly about understanding the main goal, getting stakeholders together, talking about impacts, analyzing those impacts, and working on interfaces. And what was really important here as a last step were the interfaces. I already knew it was important, but it became more and more essential as the research proceeded, because we really need to know early on where we need to collaborate to actually avoid these things from happening. This is not in the Netherlands, by the way. Minor point. So this also resulted in interface management in inter-organizational projects, where we checked, okay, if there's a change or a project, which business units are impacted, what does it mean for them, where are the internal interfaces, where are the interfaces between the business units, and in the end, where are the interface in the project, and where do we need to coordinate. So going to a more practical example maybe. I don't know if you read it in the news, the Unimog. It has been implemented. It's a collaborative project between NS and ProRail, started in 2019. And it aims to away stranded trains from the NS. It can drive both on the track and on the road. And it's under management by ProRail, so that also shows that a lot of collaboration is necessary. We were closely involved in the project. I think since 2019, 2020, so almost 4 years, and in that process there were several aspects which were uncovered actually, which needed to be considered for the Unimog to be integrated. The first one, of course, if we don't use the Unimog, we need to store it somewhere. The Unimog needs to be maintained, make sure it's doing what we want it to do when needed. It had to comply with a lot of safety regulations when operational. And of course, when operational, a lot of processes need to be in place, because who is going to do what? Where's the communication? Where's the collaboration? To make sure the whole process is going safely. The driver of the Unimog, of course, needed to be trained to operate the vehicle, but also the train driver had to know, okay, when my train is being pulled away or towed away, how do I react? How do I act in those situations? Are those processes in place, and how does he behave? So also a lot of communication and coordination between the two train drivers. Sorry. And the Unimog needed to be remote controlled, so from a distance. So we also have to take into consideration, okay, how large can those distances actually be? So that was in short what I did in 4 years, content-wise. We also did a lot more. We had a lot of presentations, too many masterclasses, a lot of interviews, a lot of presentations, a lot of collaboration with knowledge partners. And after 4 years, I can honestly say I have to agree with Josh. Wait, not there? Yeah, workshop, masterclasses. I have to agree with Josh that I think that the PhD is not stressful at all. Thank you so much. Okay, now we wait till 4:45. And yeah. Then the actual details.
Please be seated.
I open this public meeting of the Doctorate Board of the University of Twente. I would like to express a very warm welcome to all of you in this audience, but also online, especially the family, seated here, and friends and colleagues of the candidate. A special welcome is extended to members of this committee that are welcome here today, and I will introduce them in the order in which they will appear. My name is Ariane. I am the chair of this meeting. The first opponent that you will hear today is Professor Olsen, who is from Norway, and I'm going to look in the dissertation. He's from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. After Professor Olsen, you will hear Professor Santema. He is from the University of Delft University of Technology. Then Professor Dollevoet will ask his question, followed by Professor Hallman from the University of Twente, sitting on my utter right, followed by Professor Bonnema, University of Twente, and the last one who will pose questions is Professor Henseler from the University of Twente. I haven't introduced the two promoters, Professor van Dongen and Dr. Braaksma, sitting on my right side, and the co-promoter, Dr. Haanstra, next to Professor Halsman. That is a long introduction. Very good for the candidate to get hold of her nerves, which is good. Can I invite the candidate and her parents to take their place in the audience? I told you that Professor Olsen will ask the first question. That was not quite correct. The first question will come from me. And that is, dear candidate, are you ready for the defense?
That's it easy.
Highly esteemed director, I'm ready.
That is a good answer. Then let's move to Professor Olsen. Professor Olsen, may I invite you to pose your questions?
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, thank you for an interesting thesis, and it's always appreciated when someone applies managerial aspects to a railway, which sometimes tend to be a technology-focused area. So this is much appreciated and much needed. I have some questions. It's one question about objectives. You have two models throughout the thesis, but they are finally in the final chapter, where both of them, it's the Mosaic model and the SD development process. Both of them begin with a clear goal, but yet they include a dynamic process, iterative process. So my question is, how do you combine a goal, how you make a goal formulation which is clear enough to support the process, but yet not too limited so that it hinders creativity and reduces room for maneuvering?
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for your nice word and also for your question. If I understand correctly, you're focusing on the objectives in
correct.
two of the designs, which are summarized in the end of my thesis.
Yeah, and the kind of structure of objective,
Yeah.
how you formulate an objective so that it defines a direction, gives strategic direction, but that support operational flexibility, which I understand your model indicate that is needed.
Yeah, let me start with the objectives, which are goals which everyone are actually working towards, and something we have seen a lot in the railway sector, in the project we were involved in, is that the goals were not always similar between the people working together. A lot of people also said that they usually assume that people have a similar goal, so that all of them are working towards certain objectives, but when engaging with each other, when they were already multiple sessions, it was actually, it emerged that that was almost never the case. So it really helped making that explicit as soon as possible in the process. That's also why the artifacts start with it. By starting with it, you make it explicit, then people can actually talk about it, know what they are thinking, and what's the word, diverge actually into a certain direction. And going more into the specific ones, let me just find it. I'll just refer to figure 7.1, which also starts with a clear goal actually. So by making it explicit, you have the people talking about it and already know from front end that we're going towards a certain direction. But I call it the system definition development process, and in that process, we also saw that it's really important to include more experts, more expertise, to also know, okay, if this is our goal, what will be the impact on the existing system, and do we need to include more people? So more knowledge becomes available, more information. And with that, it became a bit more iterative. I don't know if that answers your question a bit, or if you...
Yeah, it probably does. Some of your earlier models, some of the models you used earlier don't begin with goal, but they begin with problem definition. What problem do we want to solve? And in that type of models, the goal comes like after. You have examples from climate, where you said the goal was to make Netherlands climate robust. But some of your models will indicate that the problem is climate change.
Yes.
So
Yes, I understand. Thank you for your clarification. The model we developed for the climate change is figure 7.3, the one which you're referring to in the previous chapter in my dissertation. It was about the process within ProRa itself, so how they actually went from climate change and an overall goal and objective of the organization to strategic plans to actually apply climate change. So that is a bit of a difference. That was more insight in the process of how it was going, but the artifact we developed was 7.3, and there we also started with the objective.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Can I do a follow-up question?
I think so.
Yeah.
A short one, yes.
Yeah. You have two chapters, 3 and 4. One focus on system definition and risk assessment. The other, Mosaic, is more on change management. Is it a major difference with them? To me, the risk analysis can be more focused, while the change management aspect in Mosaic is wider. Can you reflect on the differences briefly reflect on differences between these two processes?
Highly learned opponent, thank you for your second question. There is a reason I started with risk analysis. My project itself, it had a definition and a name, and it was system definition. I had no background in it at all, so I had no understanding of what it meant. I was already in the railway sector, but system definition, it could mean everything. It could mean the definition of a system itself. And the longer I was in the project and interviewed people within NS ProRail, I noticed that system definition is actually something they use. It's something which is mandatory by law in the Dutch railway system, and which they have to develop for risk assessment. So when I started entering projects within SM ProRail, those were my first encounters actually with system definitions as an artifact, an overview of a change which had to be integrated in the railway systems. So that's where I understood, okay, they already have some kind of system thinking artifact method, how you want to call it. And from there, the experience actually grew. So within the organization, there were a lot of case studies which I could join to see how are they using it, why are they using it or not, how can it be improved. And the more interviews I had and more projects I joined actually, it also became clear that it's more than only safety. It's also about having a train driver wear a red hat. How do we manage that actually? For that, we still need some kind of overview. We still need some kind of system definition. So that's how I actually shifted from the overviews for only risks to integration itself.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then I'm happy. So I give the floor back to the director. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you very much. Then I would like to invite Professor Santema to pose his questions.
Thank you very much, Madam. Candidate, thank you. Thank you for the wonderful thesis with a lot of valuable and useful research, results of your research. And I think it will be very handy in your job as a strategic asset manager at Stedin. I would like to discuss the people side of systems and social technical systems with you. And I have a few reasons for that. And first of all, it is page 6 of your thesis. It starts with the saying of Wayne Dyer. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And then I thought, okay, this book is, you're very far away, but you can hear me, right?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So this book is about things, right? So artifacts or, yeah, we can talk about, not talk with. And then I thought, I was taught in the first hype of social technical systems or social technical thinking in the 80s and 90s of last century by de Sitter. And that was about working groups, people working together, and a lot of human behavior in there. As a matter of fact, you could say it was only about people and humans and them working together. So the core was people are making organizations and people are working in the systems, but they are also making the systems. Yeah. You probably already feel where I'm heading, right? No?
No idea.
No clue. Okay. Then I go on in explaining it. So organizations are the sum of all the organization or the human behavior in there. And I saw that you don't reference to this typical first hype kind of use of social technical systems. If I then further read in your thesis, I just picked out some sentences, but page 95, social technical systems like railways are becoming increasingly complex as numerous changes are constantly being integrated to improve or maintain desired performances. And again, it might be the elephant in the room here, but I thought, why is there no people or human or things in there, but still things? And how can railways become increasingly complex by itself? Because it's a thing, right? Next one, page 137. In railway projects, distinct tasks are carried out by various business units across diverse organizations. So still there, things, right? So then I thought I'm going to look at your work from another angle. Let's count words. And I got to a little bit below 1,000 times the word systems, and not up to 100 about users, humans, people, right? Then I got the propositions, and even there, I don't ask for reading them out, but 9 times systems and only 2 times people. So my first question is, can you please help me out how it works if you want to change, interact, innovate, cooperate, not having people in social technical systems?
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for your very elaborate question. I'm thinking a bit where I should start, because nowhere in the thesis say that I don't include humans. It's the opposite of that. I clearly mentioned that it's a socio-technical system because it's not only a technical system like our previous opponent said, it's also about the humans. It's becoming really impossible to implement, even if it's only a technical change, without including all the stakeholders, all the people involved in the railway system. And what I see as socio-technical is different domains. So the technical domain, the human domain, process domain, the functional domain, all domains which are out there in theory. But I don't focus on the technical part or human part separately. I think they, especially in socio-technical systems, they should be considered in parallel to each other to actually make sure when we are integrating a change, and that change can be a technical change, it can again be the train driver wearing a red hat, that we actually make sure that we're including all the domains and not only focusing on one. I don't know if that answers your question a bit.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. And can you then further describe why you choose to have such a descriptive way of talking about humans? I said it's the elephant in the room. You know they are there, but you don't talk about it.
Thank you for your follow-up questions. I think I do talk about them. I also think a system, it's not, as I describe it in my dissertation, it's not a technical system itself. It's really a social-technical system. So in 1,000 times you have found it in my book, it's always social-technical system where the humans are involved. So I think I do pay attention to it a lot. Can you repeat your question?
No, your answer was already okay.
Then I think it is time to move on to the third person to pose a question. I'm so sorry. But I think Professor Dodwood will follow up on this in a different way.
Thank you, dear rector. Dear candidate, this is not my area, so I only have experience more than 20 years how it works or not. That's up to everybody in the room. I think everybody knows how it works. But I like to have some questions about how robust is your system, because when I read your thesis, it's more about how to get all the information into one model. That looks like one model fits all. But when I look in my own experience, I think it's just the opposite. You get more diversity the longer you work in the railway business. So that's what I like to talk about. How can you explain, for example, when you have risk is very important, safety, you know how it works in the railway business. Therefore, we have the highest SIL level in you can expect higher than a nuclear power plant. So would it be helpful when we lower that down so you get more discussion on the work floor and not so stiff behavior, not so flexible because of safety and how to write down like we do on EUTMS? Can you deliberate on that?
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for your question. I'm still gathering my thoughts a bit what exactly the question is. I'm still here at robustness and a lot of different models in the railway system. But you want to lower the safety integrity level.
Yeah, what is the effect? So when you say, okay, safety, just forget for one moment, and then talk about the problem or to integrate or whatever. Should it make some difference when you switch down these kind of mechanisms?
Based on my 4 years experience in the railways, I don't know if it's that easy to just bring down the safety integrity level, that's one. But what often came up during the projects we actually joined was that not all of the important stakeholders within one organization or even within numerous organizations were involved from the beginning, and that sometimes also include the safety people. And I also think if we bring that a bit to the front end, maybe they can also help think about, can we bend here a bit, can we bend there a bit? But what we often have seen is that, I will mention a specific example. One of the interviewees I had a talk with, he mentioned that for a certain project, he was a safety expert, he was included only in the end. So in the end, he just had to go check. If not, then a process had to be changed. but it was already in that phase that something had to be done. And he said it's really not a workable situation, especially for safety, if you include the right people at the front end or as early on as possible. That can really help make a difference in the whole process leading up to actual implementation or integration. So I think if you can lower the safety integrity level, that's question one, or the first point. I really think if we bring all the right people in the front end, that we can have open discussions about it, that can really make a difference in the whole process.
Thank you for your answer. I think it's very clear what you say. Another way, I'm very impatient and I like to run like Hel could say, to make some results. So when I look to your model and I think it's really the truth how it works internally. But sometimes you can also go to the government, to the parliament, do some second chamber questionnaires, and then it's going from the ministry directly to the board of SM ProRail, and then you get results within one day. So should that not be easier to do than just make a lot? It's so difficult and it's so complicated or whatever. So what I do mostly not every day because then it doesn't work anymore. But why not with ITO or ATMS just one question in second chamber in the week and there we go? How would you comment on that?
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for your follow-up question. Really interesting question. We, together with my paradigms, we've been having these discussions a lot the last 4 or 5 years. I think in the end, the people in Den Haag don't do the integration. So it would be really difficult if we say, okay, this is what we want to do. They have to do it. And what's happening after they said or gave approval. So I don't think that's a workable situation. In the end, the actual integration is done by the people in NS and the people in ProRail, and they have to think about, okay, this is the change, this is the impact of this part of ERTMS on my domain, and these are the other tests, the other processes, everything which needs to be arranged. And I'm not 100% sure that the highest people in Den Haag have a lot of knowledge about this, but that's my understanding. So I don't know if that's a workable solution. No.
I think what I like to see or to understand is that one person can make a difference. And if you have no idea or no knowledge at all, I think that's not a parameter, and that's really a sad story. But okay, but I think is that the truth that you can say, okay, one human factor can change the full process?
No, I don't think they can change the full process, but I do think they can impact it a lot from higher up.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for your questions.
Anders, you're welcome.
Yep. Okay.
Professor Hallman, would you like to pose your questions?
Thank you, Madam Director. Dear candidate, with a lot of interest, I have also read your PhD thesis. I think it's clearly written, the methodology well explained, and the outcome of your research is concrete and also valuable. Having said that, I still have some issues that I would like to discuss with you. The first is that in the introduction of your PhD thesis, I missed a discussion about the commonalities and the differences between railway systems and other type of complex systems. And at the end of your thesis, I was wondering if the generalizability of your research findings may also be applicable outside of the railway system. So I would be interested to hear from you what are potential commonalities and differences between railway systems and, for instance, a system like complex infrastructure projects or existing power grid, like you list them in the very first paragraph of your thesis.
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for your kind words, for reading my thesis thoroughly, and also for your question. The first part of the question is about the commonality between the rail sector and other complex sectors out there. 2 months ago, I started my new job in the energy sector as asset manager. And I have to say that I'm really surprised at how many similarities there are between the railway sector and the energy system. It's equally complex, equally socio-technical. There are so many inter-organizational projects happening. So in that part, I think the tools or the artifacts I developed could easily just be transferred into the energy sector. And if you look at specific characteristics, it's because, like I said, it's socio-technical, so not only the technical part, but a lot of humans have to say something about the system, and their knowledge also a bit fragmented. It's also inter-organizational, because also in the energy sector you have the manager of a net, so the grid, and you have the energy provider. So in that way it's also split. And there are also the different domains, but that's also the socio-technical part. And what is also really caught my attention actually is that I think there are equal amount of rules and regulations in the energy system as the railway. So that's also a really clear similarity between those different sectors. And going to the second part of your question, which is about more the generalizability. In the research, I use design science research, the research project, or research process, which goes from problem exploration to objectives, to design principles, implementation, evaluation, and in the end, communication to a larger audience. And by using that process, we could also generalize the design principles which were used across all of the artifacts which were developed in my thesis, which was not only mosaic or only interface management, but we tried to combine it. And by having those generalizable design principles in the last chapter, we can also see that with those principles, it goes beyond actually solving only a problem within the railway sector. We can also try and move those principles from the railway sector to a different sector and see, okay, with those principles, can we come up with a different artifact, for example.
Okay. So from his side, you say the commonalities are very clear.
From my 2-month experience in the railways, in the energy sector, I think it's...
Yes. I don't hear anything about differences.
To be honest,
Yes.
and now I'm comparing the railway sector to the energy system. I haven't noticed any differences at all, except the people I've been working with.
Okay. Maybe after some months you will discover more differences. Do I still have time for the second question? The second question that I have is, I completely agree with your observation in chapter 3. It's important to understand the technical elements of a system and its function, but also the organization and operational procedures and the human actions. Yeah? I was therefore somewhat surprised that I missed in your chapter 3 a discussion about the literature on product breakdown structures, work breakdown structure. Product is how to make a product, work is how to do the work, and organizational breakdown structure, how to organize it, which are in the literature in the 80s and the 90s have been extensively discussed in journals like the International Journal of Project Management, which you referred to. So I was surprised that I didn't find anything about that in this chapter. And also your mosaic process. There has been quite some literature about project startups, and they describe indeed also the different systems and how to combine that, etc. So my question is, are you unaware of that scientific literature? Or are you aware of the stream of literature, but didn't you consider it as relevant for your research? And in the latter case, I'm very interested to know why.
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for your follow-up question. I am aware of project breakdown structures, work breakdown structures. I've looked into it a lot, especially during the first year and the second year of my my research project. within NSM ProRail, I've also seen that there were several people who tried to develop a system definition or a way of system thinking by using these breakdown structures. But the problem with those were that they were the only ones developing it. They didn't include the essential people in breaking down these systems, breaking down these structures, and in the end, the people developing it were the only ones who could actually use it, and that's not really, yeah, good for the organization itself, I would say. I did look into it. I remember there was one specific breakdown structure in ProRail which I really liked, and the developers were really enthusiastic about it. They really wanted to try it out in all the projects, and it would change the whole world. When I spoke to other people about it, they were less enthusiastic because it really didn't cover their understanding how they wanted to break down the system or break down the product. So in the end, also that, yeah, didn't work. So I know about literature stream. I looked into it. I saw it being used, but it wasn't as useful as we thought it would be.
That would be perhaps be a good time to move to Professor Bonnema.
Thank you, Director. Geachte promovendus, candidate, I like your thesis, and it struck me that you find system thinking very important, seeing it in the title, seeing it in, I think, 4 out of 10 propositions, being mentioned throughout your thesis. And you state in the introduction, you promise to discuss, quote, well-known systems thinking practices, end quote, in chapter 3. When I then go through chapter 3, it seems that you translate these well-known practices to there should be a system definition. Now my question is, what is system thinking in your opinion? And what's the role of the system definition in that? And as a hint, in your answer you may want to use the system test as described by Arnold and Wade, that you also include in your references. And you probably remember that talk about purpose, elements, and interconnections.
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for your question. Where do I start? I also really like the paper you're talking about Arnold and Wade, where they look at different definitions of systems and try to come up with an overarching definition for it. I think a system is...
No, I'm not asking for a definition of a system. I'm asking for system thinking.
I'm building it up. A system consists of many different elements interconnected, and all of them are working towards a common goal. And if you look at system thinking, it's a way of thinking in which we can see the coherence between those elements. Where are the interactions? Is it working towards a common goal? So all of together, can we actually see or identify the system? That's what I call system thinking. I also have a picture. I don't know if I can go to it. Can I?
Yeah, that would be very nice.
Oh. I think you've also seen this one in my thesis. And this is what I call system thinking. I tried to combine everything I did in my thesis and what I tried to do in pictures, and that is understanding how different components of a system are interconnected, and also if something changes, how that could affect the entire system. So that's what I see as system thinking. And moving on to your second part, which is about system definition. For me, system definition is...
System thinking definition.
No, system
definition.
The
system definition, yeah, that's all.
Yeah. Definition
correct.
Of system thinking.
You're correct.
And going to system definition, and that is in event of a change in a railway system, how do we actually make this overview? How do we decide, okay, this is a change, this will be the impact on these domains, on these organizations, and that overview itself is what I call system definition. It's also mentioned 300 times, I think, in my thesis, where I also focus not only on system definition, but also the system definition process. So how do we actually get to such an overview? Because I think the overview is also important, but not the most important thing. It's about actually getting the right people to talk about the right things, to actually encourage them to think in systems and interfaces.
Yes, very nice answer. Thank you. There are two things that strike me in your answer. First of all, is the line around this, because apparently the things that are outside that line, they don't matter. And the second thing is, in your interviews, you mention that you ask the people whether a system definition is a critical success factor for risk assessment. And you then say that 66% of the interviewees, I, by the way, have no clue how many people those were, say that it's important. But that also means that 34% didn't agree. Did they explain why they don't think it's so important?
Yeah, thank you for your 3 questions in one. First one, going to the line. For me, the line indicates the scope. Because if there's a certain change, let's say a really small technical part in a train, you can't focus on the whole railway system. You need to know, okay, this is where the technical change is going to be. These are the cables. This is the other part. And we need to scope it down. And that was also mentioned a lot during, I think, all of our research project, that the unclear scope is really problematic, actually, especially because changes like RTMS are covering more and more organizations. We really need to know, okay, this is what we're going to focus on, and this also needs to be included, because you can't buy an electric vehicle without having a charging port at home, just as an example. And going to the percentages about criticality of system definition, I was also shocked that quite a lot of people actually don't see it as really critical for safety. While it's everywhere, it's written in all the rules and regulations. Everyone does it because they have to do it, not necessarily because they think it adds value. And I personally think that's really problematic, because how can you safely integrate something without knowing what the impact will be?
Did they explain why they don't think it's important?
Yes, they did. Multiple reasons. One of them is they see it only as a paper task, so something they need to do, not necessarily because it adds value. They also mentioned the quality of such as system definition really depends on the experts who are involved in its development. If someone new is starting up and as a pro and starting it, you really see a quality difference. So in the end, yeah, they do it because they have to do it, not because they think it adds value. What they did say, some of them, is that it is important for the scope definition to know, okay, this is our scope, this is the system of interest we are focusing on, but not necessarily for risk assessment, which is also interesting, because in theory it's the first part of risk assessment. I was included in a case study for, I think, 1.5 years. They developed a thorough system definition, it had all the details in it, and in the end it was never used during risk session. So that also shows why are we actually spending time on something, for nothing actually. And the reason that was for that specific system definition is because only one guy developed it. No one else was included in the development.
Not much integration there.
Yeah.
So that would be a good way to conclude this discussion. Last but not least, Professor Henseler, would you like to pose your questions?
Dear candidates, it was a pleasure to read your dissertation, in particular see the progress in all the path that you went after our first encounter, the qualifier, and see what all came out of this whole endeavor. And I was particularly glad to see that you embraced the design science research approach, which not only, well, in general is a viable way to increase the relevance of research, but it also fits, of course, perfectly to what our department does. And there's a reason why we carry design in the name of the department. And in this regard, I looked particularly at chapter 4 of your dissertation, which also well, carries the word design really in front, namely the design of a structured multidisciplinary approach. We then further looked into how exactly did you design the approach. Then I was a bit disappointed, I must say, because you did say that you designed it, but I didn't learn how. Was it just a genius thought that led from there is no artifact, no process, no system, nothing, to there it is? Or was there a very elaborate process, maybe following one of the many schools of design, some of which are present in the department, like for instance co-design? So we just see you do design research and then there is a solution. What happened in between?
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for your question. I don't think it appeared out of nowhere. I'm quite sure, actually. I carefully followed the design science process, which I mentioned a couple of times in my thesis. What maybe can bring a bit of confusion is that I used the inputs from chapter 3, so where I developed the process with the care goal and scope, where the stakeholders needed to be included to iterate process. I used that also as input for my chapter 4. So that's why it's a bit separated in this. But how I went from actually nothing at all to having an artifact in the end is by, first of all, thorough problem exploration. What is really happening? Why is this such a big problem? Why can't people just know this is the change and these are the impacts? From that, we went to the objectives. Okay, so what do we actually want to achieve with based on these problems? What will help solve it? Then we went to the requirements and the design principles. And based on design principles, inferred from theory, and a lot of discussions with our stakeholders at NSM ProRail who were actually involved in this process of developing it. The initial design came out of it, actually. We tested it out in a smaller setting to see, okay, this is what we initially have. If we apply it, what is working, what is not working. Some colleagues also joined to have a better evaluation of this session. And based on that, we iterated the design, actually. Improved it. Some parts were less relevant and some parts needed the adjustment. And then, we went through the design loop again. Then we had Mosaic and tried it out in a larger set with a lot of stakeholders in a different project. So that's how we tried to close the loop, also evaluating did it do what we expected to do, what we wanted it to do. And the last part, of course, in the design science process is the communication part. So that's why I'm standing here and also why it's in my thesis.
So if I understand you correctly, it's more or less a tinkering exercise where you try this works, this doesn't work, and you come then to better and better proposition of the artifact. So meaning that is certainly a possible approach, and there is some discussion in the literature what role the design method plays and should play. Some say in the end it doesn't matter at all how you design as long as the artifact is useful and does its job. No one cares today about how has someone come up with the idea of chairhood or chair, as long as we can all benefit from this artifact. And the opposite view is there should be a very elaborate design process, and only if the process fulfills certain rigorous requirements, then things are good.
Yeah.
What is your stance in this discussion?
Thank you, highly learned opponent, for that really interesting question. I still think we're doing research, so it's not only about coming up with something and then it being really useful. I think that's focusing only on the practical side. And I wouldn't call it tingling, like you said. We actually went from problem definition to exploring, okay, these are the requirements, this is at minimal what we want to have into it. And then we looked into design principles. So, okay, in literature, what is already there and how can we apply those different things. And then when we had the initial overview, we tested it out. So it was more an iterative loop in that part of the design science research process to help improve it and help improving it and being more practical for organizations itself. What is my standpoint? I think as researchers, you always have to be able to do the same thing again, or for someone else to go through the same process. And I don't think they would come up with the same exact artifact, because in the end, you choose design principles based on what is fitting to a certain context. But I do think that the requirements and the objectives would be similar.
Really appreciate your you're striving for replicability and generalizability. And then you, in subsection 7, 2.5.2, used inductive and deductive reasoning, but not abductive.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremony. May I invite the candidates and her paradigms to take their place in the audience. I adjourn the public meeting of the Doctorate Board of the University of Twente.
please be seated.
Ik heropen deze openbare zitting van het College voor Promoties van de Universiteit Twente. Mag ik de promovendus en haar paranimfen verzoeken hun plek voor deze tafel in te nemen. Het College voor Promoties van de Universiteit Twente, door ons vertegenwoordigd, heeft kennis genomen van uw proefschrift met de stellingen en heeft uw verdediging gehoord. Het College voor Promoties heeft besloten, krachtens artikel 7.18 van de Wet op het Hoger Onderwijs en Wetenschappelijk Onderzoek, u de graad van dokter te lenen. Ik verzoek de promotor zich van de opgedragen taak te kwijten en wil iedereen in de zaal en de commissie vragen om op te staan.
De kracht van de bevoegdheid ons toegekend door de wet en namens het College voor Promoties bevorder ik Merishna Ramtahalsing tot dokter en verleen ik u de rechten die verbonden zijn aan de dokterstitel. Ten bewijze hiervan overhandig ik u het diploma, ondertekend door de rector magnificus, de secretaris van de promotiecommissie en uw promotoren, en bekrachtigd met het zegel van de Universiteit Twente. Dan ga ik hem even uithalen, Merishna. Dat is het mooiste moment. Mooi. Voor de foto? Is geen naam gespeld? Oké. Daar waar je bent sterkste. Alsjeblieft.
Zeer geleerde dokter Ramtahalsing, mag ik ook u namens de universiteit feliciteren met de behaalde waardigheid. U hebt vanaf nu het recht de dokterstitel te dragen. De dokterstitel betekent dat de samenleving op de kwaliteit van uw oordeel kan vertrouwen. Dat u integer en transparant handelt en dat u onafhankelijk communiceert over de resultaten en de maatschappelijke relevantie van uw werk. Waardeer de dokterstitel als een eervolle onderscheiding en een welverdiend voorrecht. Maar vergeet daarbij nooit de plicht die zij u oplegt. Jegens samenleving en wetenschap. Ik heb gezegd, dank u wel. Ga eens even kijken. U kunt gaan zitten. U kunt blijven staan. Ik wil nu graag het woord geven aan de andere promotor, Dr. Bruisma. Die nog enkele woorden van lof tot u zal richten.
Dear Rector, dear Leo, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I'm honored to give the laudatio to you, Merishna. For friends and family of Merishna, I will now switch to Dutch. Beste Merishna, dit weekend zat ik op Ameland met mijn gezin en ik zat al met mijn gedachten bij deze promotie. En ja, hoe zou het gaan? Waar is deze geslaagde en ambitieuze reis begonnen, dacht ik. Hè? Wat hebben we al met elkaar meegemaakt? De samenwerking startte eigenlijk al meer dan 5 jaar geleden toen we in contact kwamen over een mogelijk stageproject. Dat was de eerste keer. Je gaf toen in een eerste telefoongesprek al aan dat je naast een interessante opdracht ook al aan een meer praktisch PhD-traject zat te denken. Dus eigenlijk al aan het vervolgen. Op dat moment hadden we goede contacten. Op dat moment PPG, een verfabriek. En dat was in Amsterdam. Daar vond je geen enkel probleem. Daar had je familie zitten. Ik had ook nog allemaal grote stagevergoedingen geregeld. Want ik dacht, niemand wil ooit naar Amsterdam. Maar Merishna, die wilde er heel graag heen. En je ging daar voortvarend aan de slag. Dat liep zo goed dat er eigenlijk ook een automatisch volg in leek te zitten bij een afstudeertraject. Dat was bij Structuur Rail. Toen kwamen we al een beetje in die railsector. Jouw kritische werkhouding en jouw onafhankelijke scherpe blik en gezinnigheid kon ik op dat moment eigenlijk al heel goed waarderen. Bij Structon richt je op het managen van innovaties die met onderhoud te maken hadden. Dat was wenselijk omdat bij Structon de aandacht heel versnipperd was, over verschillende vernieuwingen en noodzaak tot focus was. Hier moest ook al de afstemming tussen de verschillende organisatieonderdelen worden verbeterd. En dat legde eigenlijk al de zaadje voor het onderzoek wat daarna nog moest komen. Bij PPG en Structon had je een fijne tijd en een plek waar je heel erg op je markt was. Structon Rail wilde je heel graag houden. En ik was al bezig om op bestaande contacten daar een plek voor je te organiseren. Maar toen kwam er ineens een andere kans langs. Dat was rond de samenwerking tussen ProRail en NS. Er was een vacature. En hier had je eerst wel een beetje twijfel bij. Paste dit wel bij jou en was je hier eigenlijk aan toe? Dus het was niet een PhD, maar een PhD op dat moment. Nou ja, Leo en ik overtuigden jou dat dit met jouw talent toch wel echt een hele bijzondere kans was. Je liet je overtuigen door ons. In jouw onderzoek had je met de samenwerking met de introductiemanager... wacht even hoor. Dit traject startte ook met een kennismaking met jouw familie. Ik vond het bijzonder hoe wij achter jou stonden, dat je op afstand van je familie toch doorging. En dat was ook heel erg belangrijk, want zij zagen voor jou de toekomst hier in Nederland. Je ging vanaf dat moment samenwerken met Jawar Abbas en Nina Jacobi, die hier ook allebei niet voor niets jouw partner zijn vandaag. Voor jou was het allemaal wel een beetje wennen. Bij PPG en Structon zat je in een warm bad en hier leek het project niet te willen vlotten. En dat was eigenlijk een understatement. De samenwerking met je nieuwe begeleider en de betrokken organisaties verliep eigenlijk stroef. Je maakte je zorgen over je proces in voortgang. Daarnaast was familie op afstand, waren er verschillende bijzondere gebeurtenissen met je vader, familie en vaderland, die je zeker niet onberoerd lieten. Voor jou is je familie heel belangrijk. Je vond daarom vandaag ook heel belangrijk dat je familie hier bij dit belangrijke moment aanwezig kon zijn. Dus allemaal dank daarvoor dat je gekomen zijn. Langzamerhand raakte hij ook meer betrokken bij het promotietraject. Eerst als onofficiële begeleider, later als tweede co-promotor, uiteindelijk als promotor en leider van het onderzoek. Ondanks de tegenslagen zag ik dat je goede ideeën had, erg hard werkte en ook doorzette. We zagen dat we als team anders en beter moesten samenwerken in de relatie met ProRail en NS speciale aandacht nodig had. Samen zijn we toen de verwachtingen beter gaan managen. En ook Varenimfe wil ik daar zeker ook nog voor bedanken voor die rol daarin. We gingen daarom als team anders proberen te werken. Onder andere een gezamenlijk jaarverslag in plaats van één begeleider. We gingen zogenaamde masterclasses organiseren. Dit was intensief voor ons allemaal en hierdoor vonden wij ook onze manier om de verschillende stakeholders beter in het project te betrekken en ook deelgenoot te maken van ons gezamenlijke onderzoek. Ook dank daarvoor, zag ik zal zitten. In komende tijd gingen de contacten online door. Ons contact werd daarmee letterlijk wat afstandelijker. Ik herinner me nog dat we digitale of hybride meetings aan het doen waren, maar er kwam toen ook weer ontspanning en wat lol in het project. Het hielp veel, denk ik, dat je met Jawar en Nina kon delen. Tussendoor kon je ze nu dan naar Suriname, voor jou erg belangrijk, om ze dan ook weer op te kunnen laden. Ook leerde je in deze promotieperiode volgens mij je vriend kennen en ben je gaan wonen in Rotterdam. Even kijken. In je onderzoek had je met de samenwerking met de introductiemanager Annelies van Une een bijzonder bruikbare case. En die heb je ook een hele onderzoek gebruikt. Maar dat was eigenlijk het moment dat het begon te lopen, had ik het gevoel. Je deed hiervoor design science research en probeert op basis van de door jou geïdentificeerde principes het systeemdenken te vertalen, ook in eenvoudige tools en processen. Kroon op je werk vind ik eigenlijk ook wel die mozaïekbenadering, methode, framework, hoe je het noemt, voor het managen van integratie bij interorganisationele processen. Hiermee probeer je bij de verschillende perspectieven van de belanghebbenden in kaart te brengen en middels een eenvoudig stappenplan. Je kon je resultaten bij railforums en ook railform en tijdens de masterclasses met verven presenteren. Uiteindelijk kwam Bram Haanstra ook bij het onderzoek. Vanuit zijn eigen onderzoek kwam hij steeds meer in een begeleidende rol. En heeft hij uiteindelijk ook de rol als co-promotor op zich genomen. Willem zorgde voor een zeer waardevolle ondersteuning waar ik me meer richtte op de hoofdlijnen in het proces. Zat Willem meer op de details. Vooral in de afrondende fase heeft hij denk ik veel waarde ook toegevoegd. Dus dat wil ik ook even gezegd hebben. En Leo, jij was hierbij de leidende promotor ook heel erg belangrijk. Hij had heel veel vertrouwen in jou. Maar hij gaf mij de uitdaging en de kans het SIRA-onderzoek uiteindelijk operationeel te leiden toen dit nodig was. En naarmate de tijd vorderde, Merishna liet je mij en Leo en Willem ook steeds meer toe in je onderzoek. en stemden dus steeds beter op elkaar af. En ik vond het mooi om te zien hoe jouw zelfvertrouwen groeide. En vandaag helemaal onder de indruk. Achter jouw soms wat cynische, zelfkritische blik schuilt een persoon die hard is voor de zaak en mensen om zich heen. Voor jou was een baan bij de universiteit meer dan alleen promoveren. Je hebt je altijd breder ingespannen binnen de leerstoel in het departement van DCM als het nu gaat om het afzet van Leo Verdongen met het maken van een bijzonder afscheidsboek, de WCM Summer School, de hybride ondersteuning, docent bij de peer reviews, waarbij jij zelf het systeem natuurlijk verbeterde wat 2-3 voorgangers al hadden gemaakt. En je hebt zelfs een rol gespeeld in de selectie van een nieuwe hoogleraar. Jij had hierbij altijd jouw eigen unieke perspectief op de zaak. Je weet dat we graag doorgegaan waren met jou in onze leerstoel in het departement. Na lang nadenken wil je toch graag liever jouw kennis en ervaring in de praktijk brengen. Met jouw talent kon je uit verschillende aanbiedingen kiezen, maar je hebt gekozen voor een prachtige functie als strategisch asset manager bij Netbeheer Stedin. Je gaf aan dat ook jouw wetenschappelijke achtergrond hier gewaardeerd wordt en je graag een losse aanstelling bij de UT houdt. Nou, dat willen wij ook heel graag. Wij blijven daarmee graag op enige afstand toch met jou in contact. Naast dat er nu een einde komt aan het sieronderzoek, komt hiermee ook een einde aan de periode van meester gezel. Leo, Willem en ik hebben hier zoveel mogelijk mee proberen te geven. En we nemen allemaal ook een beetje een deel van een stokje over. Leo met emeritaat gegaan is. Maar het is nu ook aan jouw beurt om het geleerde gedachtegoed over systemen, waardendenken, verbetering van onderhoudsconcepten, samenwerking in de keten en lifecycle management uit te gaan dragen. In dit geval bij Stedin. En we wensen je hierbij, en dan spreek ik dus ook als zoals als team, heel veel succes toe en nogmaals gefeliciteerd. Ja. I'm also allowed to give you a small gift. This kind of nice booklet with all the signatures of the full committee. So, congratulations. Dank je wel.
Nou, we zijn bijna aan het eind gekomen. Ik wil nog de laatste kans gebruiken om u te feliciteren met de nieuwe waardigheid. Fantastisch gedaan. Het was een prachtige verdediging. Dames en heren in de zaal, u kent haar waarschijnlijk en u had niets anders verwacht. Maar dit was een hele mooie verdediging. We zagen hier een onafhankelijke, zelfstandige onderzoeker die helemaal klaar was voor de dokterstitel en die met alle charme, met humor, op een hele mooie manier de toch hele moeilijke vragen heeft beantwoord. Dus gefeliciteerd met de dokterstitel. Vooral u ook, ouders, Quinn, zus, Rashdi, broer online, hè? Dat is Rawien met nichtje Lina. Fantastisch. Jammer dat ze er niet bij kunnen zijn. Ik hoop dat zij nog genoten hebben van deze vereniging. Maar ik denk dat het niet anders kan. Ik ga zo afsluiten. Dus ik ga dit heel hartelijk dank dat u toch gekozen hebt voor het promotietraject. En ons dit boek, het onderzoek hebt gegeven. En deze jonge dokter. En gefeliciteerd. Ik ga zitten, dan ga ik verder met u praten. Voor ik afsluit zou ik graag u willen verzoeken nog een laatste keer de plek in de zaal te nemen, want dan kan ik wat huishoudelijke zaken met het publiek doornemen. Ja. Wij gaan zo meteen de zaal verlaten. Dat doen wij altijd met de jonge dokter, paranimfen en de familie op de eerste rij, familie op de tweede rij, mee te nemen. U volgt de deel naar buiten. Dan volgt de commissie en daarna andere gasten in de zaal. Voordat deze jonge dokter van u is om te feliciteren, willen we graag nog de gelegenheid gebruiken om foto's te laten maken van de commissie met de jonge dokter, van de commissie jonge dokter en familie. En dat is dan mooi aandekken dat u heeft aan deze fantastische ceremonie. Daarna is er gelegenheid tot feliciteren van de jonge dokter. Zij zal u nog even verlaten om een handtekening op onze muur te zetten. Dat is onze Wall of Fame, waar haar handtekening niet kan ontbreken. Maar daarna is ze weer van. Dat is het laatste. Ik ga nu sluiten. Ik sluit deze openbare zitting van het College voor Promoties van de Universiteit Twente.